Welcome back to another video here on the Washington Football Maniacs YouTube podcast. Well, today, folks, I want to talk about something that some of you probably already know, but I encourage others to kind of search for if you're ever curious about really getting into watching classic games, especially classic games of the Washington Redskins. Before we get into that, of course, this channel is dedicated to news and commentary for your Washington Commanders. If you're down with that, please make sure that you have subscribed to the channel. And also, when you do, make sure you hit that notification bell so you won't miss any other video releases. So I'm Greg, and I have been a fan since 1981. And I grew up watching the Redskins during their glory years, Super Bowl wins, consistently making the playoffs year in and year out. Very few times during that Joe Gibbs one era where they did not make the playoffs. There was only like maybe one year that they finished below 500. The whole time that Joe Gibbs was the head coach of the Redskins from 81 to 92. So during those 11 years, I was able to really enjoy watching football so much. And, I'm so happy that we have a medium that we can go to where we can watch some of these games. Now, provided you can argue the legality of it. Quite honestly, I'm number one, I'm not sure if the NFL even has the recordings of every single game. I would probably say that a lot of those recordings and tapes have probably deteriorated throughout the decades, so they probably don't have a lot of those games. And if they do, it takes a long time to digitally convert, remaster, make those games where they're even viewable for folks. But I would say, if they actually do have, this stuff, they need to release it because there's so much history. And, a lot of people who grew up, who are Redskins fans or Commanders fans now, who are maybe 30 years old, of course, you missed you missed all the glory years, right? I mean, you grew up basically, well, you grew up the whole Dan Snyder era, unfortunately. And so you don't really understand how it felt to watch a team that was always considered one of the premier franchises in the league. So being able to find some of these classic games on YouTube is quite frankly, it's outstanding. I've had days where I've just kind of sat back and vegged upon, not necessarily full games, but basically kind of like sped up. They'll cut out a lot of the stuff. Thank goodness they cut out like a lot of commercials. A lot of the stuff in between plays. So they try to get the games down to, maybe 16 or 30 minutes. Every now and then you'll get some people who will upload full games where it's like 3 hours long and you're watching all of the commercials as well, which does kind of bring you back. But after a while, it's like, don't feel like investing that much time into watching one game. But, if they're able to condense the games down to like 30 minutes, I'll watch that. And I'm sure that a lot of you know about, and I don't really want to call out the channels per se because I don't want to get them in trouble. But there's definitely one channel that everybody should check out that I'll just say this, that they love retro games. That's all I'm going to say. And they have uploaded so many great games. Of course, all the games that Washington wins, because who wants to be able that's funny too. I've seen a lot of games where I'm like, oh wow, I remember this game from like 1994, and then it winds up being a game that they lost. And I was like, I forgot they lost this game. Dang it, it's like I sat here for 30 minutes to watch an old classic game where they lost. I don't want to see that. But go and search out these games. That way you can really kind of get an idea of how that these players played back then. Why that we like John Riggins so much. Why Art Monk was one of the best, Hall of Famer wide receiver. Joe Theismann, I didn't realize how athletic Joe Theismann was. Until I went back and watched some of those old games, and I was like, wow, you know what? Joe was not just a drop back passer, like a Peyton Manning or Tom Brady. He moved around quite a bit, and he was very athletic. So I enjoyed going back and rewatching a lot of those games that Joe played in, games that Jay Schrader played in. Jay, strong arm. I know that he started off really good, and then things fizzled out with him in that Super Bowl year. But he was the next big thing in Washington. I think the problem is that it did go to his head, and he thought he was, and a lot of the other players didn't really appreciate him as much. And I'm sure that players. And I would love for you to come on the channel. I'm sure that you could probably really speak to that. I don't know how Jay is as a person, but he didn't last very long, only a couple of seasons or so. And then he went to, I believe it was Oakland or LA back then as it was, the Raiders. And he played for the Raiders for a number of years. But it was still neat being able to watch him play. He was very streaky, but when he was on, man, he made some outstanding throws. Of course, Doug Williams. Doug, I remember him to this day. I would not had to have went back and watched any game. To this day, I remember how much of a strong arm that Doug had, and Doug would make some passes that you would just leave you breathtaking. These long passes, huge bombs downfield that he would just hit his receivers perfectly. He was, and he had some short passing games too that were pretty good. But I really enjoyed. It seemed like when Doug was in there, the receivers seemed to adjust so much better to his passes than Jay Schrader. I don't know why it was, but they seemed like it was just so much easier for them to catch his passes. That's just what I saw. Those receivers probably could tell you differently, but it was fantastic. Now, Doug was not the athletic, moving around quarterback as much. He was really big, kind of lumbering, but Doug had an arm. He had such an arm on him, man. I tell you. And of course, later on, Mark Rippon. Watching Mark play again. Now, Mark was definitely the guy where it was like, if you just have him to sit back and throw bombs all day long, he's going to throw a perfect pass every single time. But if he's throwing these short passes, man, they were ducks. But he was not a short pass type of guy, and he was not athletic either. He was, I always felt kind of like a kinship to Mark Rippon, because he didn't seem very athletic on the field. And I was not, as much as I wanted to be when I was growing up, as a teenager watching Rippon play, I was not very athletic. I was kind of awkward. And I felt, kinship to Mark Rippon. No offense, Mark. I love you, man. But yeah, but the one thing that Joe Gibbs alluded to this, the one thing that he had was that long pass downfield. And man, when Rippon was on, that one year, that Super Bowl year, man, I mean, he was fantastic. Um, he was just fantastic. He was phenomenal. Um, I don't think I'd ever seen a quarterback in a Redskins uniform play like that consistently that year. Unfortunately, it seemed like things kind of started taking nosedive after that year. The 92 season. Um, I'm not sure. I think he may have been injured a couple of times during that 92 season as well. And of course, 93, um, that was kind of it for him. That was this last year, I believe, and he was gone after that. But fantastic. Like, truly, if you want to go back and understand why some of us old heads cling to the Redskins so much, it's watching these games from that era and realizing like how great the defense was, how great Darrell Green was, watching Art Monk play, Dexter Manley, Charles Mann. Um, I mean, just fantastic, fantastic teams that Bobby Beathard and Charlie Casserly and Joe Gibbs built. Just a great time watching these old games, and so I encourage you. Like I said, I'm sure if you're a Redskins fan, Commanders fan, I'm sure at some point you've went back and you're like, I want to watch these games. Now, I will say, this human nature. You're probably going to go back and watch some of the games that you remember watching as a kid, but go past that. Go back and watch some of these games in the 80s that people upload. That is really where you start to see the vision. That's really where you start to feel of, okay, wow, this is how it was watching football in the 80s. It's funny. Some of these games, it takes me back to the point where I'm like, wow, this just seems like yesterday. All of this just seems like how it should be. Watching NFC football on CBS, and then AFC football on NBC. Back then, there was no Fox. It was those two channels, and then ABC, of course, having Monday Night Football. ESPN coming in, after a while doing Sunday Night Football. But yeah, I mean, it really brings back a lot of memories. I know nostalgia for me, but just check out how football was played back then, and then look at it now. See the differences. It's really wild to even go back maybe 10 years ago and to see how much football has changed from 10 years ago. It continues to evolve, which is kind of cool. But at the same time, I do love seeing and going back and kind of reminiscing on the old stuff. So you get a chance, check it out. Maybe you'll kind of understand why some of us still cling to the Redskins stuff, because it was our era. It was what really put us on the map, per se. I know that the Redskins had some nice years back in the 70s. Of course, they went to the Super Bowl in 72 to go against the undefeated Miami Dolphins. But yeah, man, just check it out. Just check it out. Actually, I've been trying to find some more like full games from the 70s and even the 60s. Those tend to be more of those films that they kind of put together that, kind of tell a story of that day and everything. But they don't really it's not like actually watching a game per se, or highlights of those games. It's more of a film. And so it's not, I mean, it's still okay. It's not quite as exciting. I do like being able to go back and watch some of those games where, I was either an infant or I was not born yet. Just kind of get a feel of how it was. So anyway, I'm going to stop right there, folks. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a like, share this video with those you think might enjoy talking about the old Redskins games. And that said, I will see you in the next one. Take care, everybody.